The gift was wrapped in newspaper. That was the first thing 300 people noticed when Amara stepped into the Adebayo ballroom, because everything else in that room had been wrapped in gold. She held the little box against her chest, the way you hold something you already know they will laugh at. Her shoes did not match the marble. Her dress had been ironed too many times. Thin at the elbows now, and she knew it, and she came anyway. Somewhere across the room a string quartet stopped playing, not because of her, but it felt like because of her. Then Bisi turned around, a glass of champagne resting in her fingers, and her smile went flat the way a knife goes flat when it turns sideways. "Excuse me," she said, loud enough for the back of the room. "The help entrance is behind the kitchen." Amara did not move. She had been invited. She had the card in her bag to prove it. But the whole room was already looking at the newspaper in her hands, and nobody was looking at the card. "Stay with me here, because you will not believe who actually sent that invitation or what was inside that ugly little box. And by the end of tonight, the woman holding the champagne loses everything she came to protect. Before we go on, tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is. Right now, I read every single one. And if you believe a person's worth was never about their clothes, tap subscribe and stay till the end. You will want to see her face when the truth comes out. Now, let me carry you back. 3 months back, to the morning none of this had happened yet, when Amara Nwosu was just a woman with a mop and a bucket and 41,000 naira in problems. Amara lived in Ajagunle, in 2 rented rooms behind a compound gate that never fully closed. She was 26. She had the kind of face people described as tired before they described it as anything else. And that was unfair, because when she smiled, the whole thing rearranged itself into something a photographer would have stopped for. Nobody stopped for it. That was the point of her life so far. Nobody stopped. She had studied nursing for 2 years at a college in Yaba. 2 years, not 3, because in the middle of her 3rd semester her mother's kidneys began to fail, and there was a choice. And the choice was school fees or dialysis, and you already know which one a good daughter picks. So Amara folded her books into a carton, tied the carton with rope, and went to look for work you did not need a certificate to do. She found cleaning. She cleaned offices at night and homes in the day. She was good at it, quietly, the way some people are good at things nobody hands out awards for. She could make a stranger's kitchen shine and never once move a single thing out of its place, so the owner came home and could not say what was different. Only that the room felt like it was breathing again. Her younger sister was named Ease. Ease was 19 and had a heart condition the doctors kept giving long names to, and every long name came with a longer bill. Ease was clever. Ease wanted to be a lawyer and argued like one already, over small things, over whose turn it was to fetch water, and Amara let her win most of the arguments, because winning was one of the few free things she could still give her. Their evenings had a shape to them. Amara would come home smelling of other people's houses, and Ease would have kept a little food warm on the small stove, too weak most days to do much more, but proud to have done that. They would sit on the one good chair and the one bad chair, and Ease would tell Amara about the law she was reading, in second-hand textbooks a teacher had passed to her, cases with strange English names, and Amara would nod along and not understand half of it, and love every minute. On the good days, Ease talked fast, color in her face. On the bad days, her lips went a little blue at the edges and she talked slower, and Amara learned to read those edges the way a sailor reads a sky. When the blue came, Amara counted money in her head that she did not have, and smiled so Ease would not see her counting. That was the arithmetic of Amara's whole life. Rent, food, The small envelope she put aside each week for ease medication that ran out before the week did. 41,000 naira of problems, and 30-something thousand of income, the gap between them papered over with double shifts and skipped meals. She never mentioned. She had not bought herself anything new in 3 years. Not a dress, not a pair of shoes, not so much as a bottle of the nice lotion she paused over sometimes in the market and then put back. Everything she had went into the 2 lives she was carrying. She did not think of this as noble. She thought of it as Tuesday. Poverty does not feel like a story from the inside. From the inside, it just feels like arithmetic that never comes out right. So that was Amara. A woman holding up 2 other lives on a cleaner's wages, ironing the same 3 good dresses over and over, so that at least one of them was ready if the world ever knocked. On the 9th of December, the world knocked, not loudly. It came as a text message from an agency, one-off cleaning job, private hospital, overnight ward, good pay, discretion required. Discretion required. That phrase should have told her something. Rich people only ask for discretion when they are hiding. The hospital was not like the general hospital where her mother had died. This one had carpet. It had a lobby that smelled of eucalyptus and money, and a security man who looked at Amara's cleaning uniform. The way you look at a stain, you are deciding whether to mention. She was sent up to the 7th floor, private wing. 1 patient per suite, and the doors had no names on them, only numbers, and the number she was given was 704. Inside 74 was an old woman. The old woman was asleep when Amara came in with her cart, and Amara worked the way she always worked, softly, in the dark corners, so as not to wake her. She wiped down the window ledge. She emptied the small bin. And because she had been a nursing student once, and because some part of you never fully leaves the thing you almost became, her eyes drifted. The way a mechanic's eyes drift to the sound of an engine, to the drip stand beside the bed. She stopped. She was not supposed to know what she knew. A cleaner has no business reading a medication chart. But the chart was right there, clipped to the stand at her eye level, and the name of the drug on the chart did not match the color of the fluid in the bag. She had memorized those colors in her first year. She had been tested on them. A clear line ran into the old woman's arm, and the bag said one thing, and the label taped to the bag by hand said another, and the 2 did not agree. Amara stood very still. Her heart was doing something. She told herself she was wrong. She told herself she was a cleaner and it was not her place, and the nurses knew better, and she should mind her cart and go. She had every reason to go. Understand that. This is not a story about a woman with nothing to lose doing an easy, brave thing. Amara had everything to lose. She was in a private hospital where a cleaner's word against a nurse's would end exactly one way, with the cleaner blamed, the cleaner dismissed, the agency notified, the reference destroyed, and no reference meant no work, and no work meant Ease's medication and their rent and their food all coming apart at once, that same week, because there was no cushion under them. There had never been a cushion. They lived one bad decision from the street. A poor person who speaks up risks more than a rich person ever will, because the rich have a floor to land on, and the poor have only the ground. Amara knew all of this. She calculated it in about 4 seconds, standing there with her cart, the way she calculated everything. She got as far as the door. Then she thought about her mother, and the day the ward nurse had been too busy, and the small thing nobody caught, until it was the large thing nobody could fix, and she turned around. There was a nurse at the station down the hall, young, on her phone. Amara went to her and said, in the smallest voice she owned, "Please, Ma, I am only the cleaner." But the bag in 704, the label, and the chart, I think they don't agree. The nurse looked at her the way you look at a cleaner who is telling you your job. Then something in Amara's face, that face that rearranged when it was serious, made the nurse get up. The nurse checked. The nurse went pale. The nurse called someone, and then someone more senior came, walking fast, and a wrong bag came down, and a right bag went up, and Amara was already gone. Back to her cart, back to her corner, because she had learned long ago that when rich people's business goes wrong, the first person they look for is the one holding the mop. She finished the floor by 4 a.m. She never learned the old woman's name. She was paid 9,000 naira in an envelope, and she took a bus home in the grey light. And she wrote the whole thing down in a small notebook. She kept the time, the room, the drug, the color, the correction. The way she wrote everything down, because a nurse who could not afford to be a nurse still kept a nurse's habits. Then she forgot about it, or she tried to. She had rent to find. What Amara did not know, could not have known, was that the old woman in 704 was Grace Adebayo. And Grace Adebayo was the mother of one of the richest men in Lagos. And Grace Adebayo did not forget faces, and she did not forget debts, and she had been awake the whole time, lying still with her eyes almost closed, listening to a cleaner argue with herself about whether a poor woman was allowed to save a rich one's life. Now let me tell you about the Adebayos, because you cannot understand the party until you understand the family throwing it. Tunde Adebayo was 34 and ran Adebayo Pharmaceuticals, which his late father had built from a single chemist's shop in Surulere into something with a tower on Victoria Island, and a name people trusted when they were sick. Tunde was serious in the way men become serious when everything is handed to them, and they are terrified of dropping it. He worked too much, he smiled too little. He had his father's jaw and his mother's eyes, and according to everyone who knew him, none of his mother's warmth, though that was not quite true. He had just buried it somewhere after his father died, and had not gone looking for it since. He was engaged. That is the part that matters. He was engaged to Bisi Coker, and the engagement was the talk of 2 social circles, because on paper it was perfect. The Cokers were old money, old Lagos money, the kind with a family pew and a family lawyer and a family way of entering a room like the room had been waiting. What almost nobody outside the 2 families knew was that the Coker money was mostly gone, spent, sued away, poured into 3 businesses that had each failed more expensively than the last. The house on the island was mortgaged twice. The cars were leased. The name was still gold, but behind the name, the vault was echoing. Bisi knew this the way you know a toothache, and Bisi had decided, with the cold clarity of a woman watching a lifestyle slide out from under her, that Tunde Adebayo was the fix. Marry the pharmaceutical fortune, marry the tower on Victoria Island, and the Coker name would be gold, with a vault to match again. She did not love him. She had told her closest friend that once, late, after wine, I don't need to love him, I need to survive him. And then she had laughed, and her friend had laughed, and neither of them found it as funny the next morning. So Bisi was beautiful, and Bisi was frightened, and frightened, beautiful people who are used to being obeyed become cruel very easily, because cruelty feels like control, and control is the one thing they no longer have. And Grace Adebayo watched all of it. Tunde's mother sat in her wing of the family house on Banana Island. Recovered now from the hospital stay nobody in the wider world had been told about. A stay she had kept quiet, kept discreet, discretion required. And she watched her only son prepare to marry a woman whose smile never reached her eyes. Grace was 72. She had buried a husband. She knew the difference between a woman who would hold your hand at the end and a woman who was already counting the estate. And she was afraid, in the deep private way of mothers, that she was going to die and leave her serious, warmth-buried son in the hands of someone who would spend him like a leased car. She could not tell him. He was a grown man in love with the idea of a suitable marriage, and if she attacked Bisi directly, he would defend her, because that is what serious men do. They defend their decisions, harder the more the decision is questioned. So Grace did the only thing a clever old woman can do. She waited, she watched, and she kept, folded in the drawer of her heart, the memory of a cleaner in a too-big uniform who had turned around at the door. The engagement party was set for the 14th of March, a Saturday, 7:30 in the evening. 300 guests, a marquee over the back lawn, that same string quartet, a caterer flown up from a hotel in Abuja. Bisi planned every inch of it, because the party was not really a party. It was a coronation. The night she stopped being a coker with an empty vault, and became the future Mrs. Adebayo in front of everyone who had ever watched her family fall. 2 weeks before the party, Grace Adebayo made a phone call to the cleaning agency and asked, in the tone of a woman used to getting answers, for the name and details of the cleaner who had worked the 7th floor on the 9th of December. And then Grace did something that would detonate under the whole evening like a slow, patient bomb. She had a proper invitation card printed. Heavy cream paper, gold edge, the Adebayo crest. And she had it sent, by courier, to 2 rented rooms in Ajagunle, addressed to Miss Amara Nwasu. No explanation, only the card, and the date, and the time, and the address on the island, and one line handwritten at the bottom in an old woman's careful hand. You did something kind when you thought no one was watching. Someone was. Please come. Amara held that card for a long time. She did not know a single Adebayo. She turned it over twice looking for the catch. Ease read it over her shoulder and, being 19 and a future lawyer, immediately smelled a scam. Nobody sends a poor woman a gold card, Amara. This is how they harvest kidneys. But there was no request for money. There was no phone number to call and be charged. There was only an address and a date, and under everything that one impossible handwritten line. Someone was watching. Amara thought about the 7th floor. She thought about the old woman she never named, the bag that did not match the chart, the door she had almost walked out of and turned back from. And a small, absurd hope lit in her chest, the hope of a person who has been invisible so long that being seen feels like danger. What if someone had noticed? What if, one time in her whole grinding life, doing the right thing when no one was looking had actually been seen? I have to go, she told Ease. I have to know. She had nothing to wear that belonged in a house on Banana Island. She had 3 good dresses, and one of them, the blue, was the least tired. She washed it by hand. She ironed it 3 times. She had no gift, and something in her, some stubborn dignity that poverty had bent but never broken, refused to walk into a stranger's celebration with empty hands. You do not go to a person's joy carrying nothing. Her mother had taught her that. Even if you carry only water, you carry something. So Amara made her gift with the only currency she had, which was care. She took the small notebook, her nurse's notebook, the one she wrote everything in, and she copied out, in clean handwriting, on fresh pages, everything she knew about looking after an aging heart and aging kidneys. Warning signs. Which symptoms to never ignore. What questions to ask a doctor that doctors hope you won't. It was 2 years of half-finished nursing training, distilled by a woman who had watched her own mother die for want of exactly this knowledge. Offered to a family of strangers she assumed were healthy and rich and would probably throw it away. She wrapped the notebook and a small strip of medicated herbs her mother had sworn by, in the only clean paper in the house, which was newspaper. She had no gift bag, no ribbon, no gold. She had a page of last Tuesday's Guardian, folded neat and square, and taped shut with the corner of a plaster from Ease's medicine box. She looked at it in her hand. She knew exactly how it would look in a house full of gold. She went anyway. The Adebayo house did not look like a house. It looked like something a country builds to impress another country. Amara stood at the gate for a full minute before she made her legs work. There was a man in a suit checking names against a tablet, and behind him a driveway full of cars that each cost more than everything Amara had earned in her whole life, added together, and then doubled. She gave her name. The man in the suit looked at his tablet, and then at her, and then at her tablet again, because clearly there had been an error. There was no error. Her name was on it. A.N.W.O.S.U. Gast of MRS G. Adebayo. He let her through with a slowness that told her exactly what he thought, and she walked up that long drive alone, past the valets, past the marquee glowing on the lawn, and in through doors that were taller than her whole flat. And then she was inside, in the light, and the light was the problem. In the dark of a hospital ward, a cleaning uniform is invisible. In a ballroom lit like a jeweler's window, a 3 times ironed blue dress with thin elbows is a confession. People did not stare. It was worse than staring. Their eyes touched her and slid off, the way water slides off oil, and each little slide said the same thing. You are not one of us, and we both know it. She found a corner. She held her newspaper gift against her chest. She had made a mistake coming. She understood that now, but she did not know how to leave without walking back through all of them. So she stayed, folded small, hoping to survive the night by being furniture. A waiter passed with a tray of small golden things on toothpicks. He did not offer her one. He offered the couple beside her, and the couple beyond them, and his eyes passed over Amara, the way a broom passes over a spot it has decided is not dirt, but is not worth the sweep either. She was not hungry. She told herself she was not hungry. She had eaten before she came precisely so that she would not have to reach for a stranger's food and feel the reaching. 2 women near her were talking, not to her, in front of her, the way people talk in front of the help. Who invited half of these people? One said, and the other laughed. And Amara understood she was one of the half. She looked at the floor. The floor was marble, veined with grey, polished to a shine she recognized professionally. The shine of a floor. Somebody had gone over on their knees that afternoon, so that women in heels could walk on it and never think of the knees. She thought about the person who had polished it. She wondered if they had been fed. There was a girl by the window, younger than Amara, in a caterer's black and white, refilling water glasses. Their eyes met for 1 second across the bright room, the cleaner in the blue dress and the server in the uniform. And something passed between them, quick and wordless, the recognition of 2 people who both knew which door they had come in through. The girl gave her the smallest nod. It was the only kindness Amara received in that room for the next 10 minutes, and she held on to it. That nod, the way you hold a coin in a cold pocket. She almost left. Twice she measured the distance to the door with her eyes. But leaving meant crossing the whole floor under all of them, and there was still that handwritten line burning in her bag. Someone was watching. And so, she did the thing the poor learn to do better than anyone, which is wait, endure the room. Become small enough that the room forgets you and moves on. She was good at it. She had been practicing her whole life. But the room did not forget her. Because a woman in a poor dress in a bright room is a splinter, and a splinter is felt, and sooner or later a hand comes to remove it. Which is exactly when BC found her. Now, I need to be fair to BC for one moment, because a story where the villain is only a villain is a lie, and I promised you the truth. Bissy was not born cruel. Bissy was a frightened woman on the most important night of her life. A night when everything had to be perfect. Because perfect was the only thing standing between her and the ruin she had watched swallow her father. And into that perfect night walked a woman in a poor dress, carrying a gift wrapped in newspaper. And Bissy's frightened, controlling, drowning mind saw not a human being, but a flaw, a stain on the marble, something that made her party, her coronation, look less than gold. And she moved to remove it the way she would remove a wilted flower from an arrangement, without a second thought. Because in her world, some people were arrangement, and some people were staff, and the staff did not come through the front. Excuse me, the champagne glass. The flat smile. The help entrance is behind the kitchen. Amara's voice came out very small. I was invited, Ma. Invited. Visi said the word like it was a food she was allergic to. She looked Amara up and down, slow, thorough, a woman inspecting for defects. By whom? By Amara did not actually know. The card, said Mrs. G. Adebayo. She did not know a Mrs. G. Adebayo. She only knew an old woman on the 7th floor whose name she had never learned. I have a card, she said instead, and reached into her bag. Bissy did not look at the card. This is important. Everything that went wrong next went wrong because Bissy never once looked at the card. She saw the dress and she saw the newspaper, and she had already finished thinking. Put that away, she said. I don't know what agency sent you, or whether you wandered in off the road, but you are embarrassing yourself. Look at you. Her voice began to lift, began to reach for the room, because Bissy had learned that cruelty performed is cruelty protected. If everyone laughs with you, no one can call you cruel. You come to the Adebayo engagement in, what is that? Is that from a bend-down select market, carrying? She reached out and flicked the newspaper package with one manicured nail. Is this rubbish? Did you bring us your rubbish to throw away? A few people laughed, not many. But enough. Laughter is a fire, and it only needs a few. Amara held the little box tighter. It is a gift, she said. A gift. BC rolled the word around like a sweet. She was warming to it now. The audience, the attention, the delicious safety of being the beautiful one, mocking the plain one in a room that would always take the beautiful one's side. Tell me, cleaner, you are a cleaner, yes? I can smell the cleaning on you. That bleach and suffering smell, it doesn't wash out. Does it? Tell me, have you ever in your life held 100,000 naira in your 2 hands? At once? No? Then what could you possibly bring into a house like this? What could someone like you give someone like us? The word someone like you. She used it twice, the way people use it, as though it were a category and not a person, as though poverty were a species. Amara did not answer. Answering was a trap. If she named what was in the box, they would open it and laugh at the notebook. If she stayed silent, they would call her simple. There is no correct answer when the question is really only an excuse to keep hitting you. And Amara knew that, had known it since she was a girl. So she chose the silence and let it cost what it cost. Look at the shoes. A man now at Bisi's shoulder, emboldened the way cowards are emboldened by a leader who has already thrown the first stone. She wore those to a wedding, probably. Her best shoes. God. He said God like the shoes were a tragedy that had happened to him personally. And the dress, said one of the 2 women from earlier, delighted to be inside the cruelty now instead of merely near it. Has that been turned? The seams. It's been let out and taken in so many times. She was a woman who had never owned a dress long enough to turn a single seam. Mocking a woman who had turned every seam she owned. Because turning seams is what you do when there is no money for new cloth. She did not know she was confessing her own emptiness. Cruel people rarely do. Bissy drank it in. Every laugh was a brick in the wall she was building back up around her collapsing life, and the higher the wall, the safer she felt. And the safer she felt, the crueler she got. Because that is the machinery of it. That is how a frightened person becomes a monster in the space of 5 minutes in a bright room. "You know what your problem is?" she said to Amara, stepping closer, close enough that Amara could smell her perfume. Something French, something that cost more than Amara's rent. "Your problem is hope. You people always have hope. You put on your best-turned dress, and you wrap your rubbish in newspaper, and you climb all the way to Banana Island, thinking, maybe tonight, the rich people will see me. Maybe tonight I will matter. And it's almost sweet. It would be sweet if it weren't so stupid. Because I am going to do you a kindness the world has been too polite to do. I am going to tell you the truth." She leaned in. "You will never matter to people like us. Not tonight. Not ever. Now take your newspaper and use the door you came in through, which should have been the back one. A gift." Bissy laughed outright now, delighted, cruel, frightened, performing, wrapped in yesterday's newspaper. For a house like this, she turned to the small crowd that was gathering the way. Crowds gather at the edge of anything unpleasant, half wanting to stop it, half wanting to see. You see the problem in this country. Everybody wants to attend the party. Nobody wants to know their level. A person should know her level before she looks up at people like us. There it was. The whole ugly philosophy of it, said out loud. Know your level. And here is the thing I want you to notice, because it is the beating heart of everything that follows. Amara did not fire back. She had a mouth. She had a temper somewhere, the way everyone does. She could have told this glittering woman exactly where she could put her champagne. But Amara had learned something in Ajagunle that BC had never had to learn on the island, which is that when you are poor and you are cornered, your dignity is the only thing they cannot repossess unless you hand it to them. And she was not handing it over. So she stood straight and she looked BC in the eye. Not with anger, with something worse for BC, with a kind of quiet pity, and she said, I know my level, Ma. My level is that I am a person, same as you. The room went a little quiet. It was too dignified. That was the problem. A poor woman who cries or curses or flees can be dismissed. A poor woman who stands in her thin blue dress and calm tells you she is a person, same as you, is a mirror. And no one who is being cruel wants a mirror held up to them in front of 300 guests. BC's face changed. The performance cracked just for a second, and under it was the fright. And the fright made her reach for the thing that always worked, which was making it worse. Chuka, she called. Chuka was the event manager, young, sharp-suited, with the smooth, empty face of a man who had decided long ago that his career would be built on doing exactly what people like BC wanted before they finished asking. He was already there, already at BC's elbow, because men like Chuka can smell a moment like this, and they arrive early to be useful in it. Ma, remove her. BC did not even look at Amara now. She had decided Amara was solved, quietly, before the toasts, and check what she brought. I don't want anything of hers left in my house. Right away, Ma. Chuka put a hand near Amara's arm. Not on it, near it. The suggestion of force, which is its own kind of violence. Come with me, he said, pleasant, deadly. This way. And Amara, who had come all this way, on the strength of one handwritten line. Someone was watching. Began to understand that no one had been watching, that it had been a mistake, or a cruelty, or a scam after all. That Ys had been right, and that she was about to be walked out of a rich man's house like a thief, for the crime of owning the wrong dress. She went. What else could she do? She let Chuka steer her, and the little box with the notebook and her mother's herbs was still in her hands, and she thought, absurdly, that she had ironed the dress 3 times for this. 3 times. But the room was not quite finished with them. Because Tunde Adebayo, the man of the hour, had come down the great staircase in the middle of it, drawn by the gathering crowd, and he had heard the last of it remove her, check what she brought. And he was frowning, not out of kindness yet, but out of the irritation of a serious man who does not want a scene at his own engagement. He came toward them. What is happening here? Nothing, darling. Bisi's whole body changed when she turned to him. Softer, sweeter, the champagne voice. A small mix-up with the staff. Chuka is handling it. She is not staff. The voice came from the top of the stairs. Everyone looked up. Grace Adebayo stood at the top of the staircase in dark green, one hand on the rail, 72 years old, and utterly, terribly composed. She had been resting upstairs. The party was loud for her heart, and her son had begged her to stay in her wing, and she had agreed, and she had been sitting quietly by her window when a maid told her there was a commotion in the ballroom about a woman in a blue dress who had come with a gift and was being thrown out. A woman with a gift. Grace had come down the stairs faster than her doctors would have liked. She is not staff, Grace said again, and began, slowly, to descend. The room parted for her. Everyone in that room worked for, feared, or hoped to inherit from the woman coming down the stairs, and they arranged themselves accordingly. She is my guest. I invited her. Her name is Amara Nwosu. Bisi's smile did not fall, but it stiffened, the way a smile stiffens when the ground moves under it. Mama Grace, you know this, you invited her. I'm sure there's been a confusion. She came with. She has no business. I heard what she came with. Grace reached the bottom of the stairs. She was small. She should not have been able to command a room of 300, but she did, the way a single note held long enough silences an orchestra. She looked at Amara, and Amara looked back, and there was a beat, one long-held beat, in which Amara's face did the thing it did, rearranged itself out of fear and into recognition. Because she knew those eyes. She had seen those eyes half-closed in a hospital bed on the 9th of December. You, Amara whispered. 7 and 4. 7 and 4, Grace agreed. And to the room, to all of them, to her son, to the frightened, beautiful woman he was about to marry, she said. Let me tell you what this woman in the blue dress did, and then you can decide, all of you, who in this room does not know their level. But before Grace could speak another word, something happened that changed the shape of the whole night, and it happened because Bisi, cornered, frightened, drowning, made the worst decision of her life. A woman near the front of the crowd gave a small cry. My bracelet! She was an older guest, a Mrs. Ebe, dripping in the kind of jewelry that has its own insurance policy, and she was holding her wrist and looking at it with a particular horror of the very rich discovering they are slightly less rich than a moment ago. My diamond bracelet. It was here. It's gone. Now, in a room of 300 people, a bracelet can come off a wrist a dozen honest ways. It can slip. It can catch. It can be under a chair. Any calm person would have said so. But Bisi was not calm. Bisi was a cornered animal watching her coronation collapse, and in that moment she saw not a lost bracelet, but a lifeline. A way to turn the room back around. A way to make the woman in the blue dress the villain again, before Grace could make her a hero. Search her, Bisi said. Fast, loud, pointing at Amara, the cleaner. She was standing right there. She had her hands near everyone. Search her bag. Search that box she's hiding. The room turned. Of course it turned. A missing diamond and a poor woman, in the same sentence, is a story people already believe before they've heard it, because it costs them nothing to believe it, and it lets them off the hook for having watched her be humiliated. Suspicion moved through the crowd like a smell. Amara's face went white. I didn't. I have never even been close to that lady. I've been standing here the whole. Then you won't mind. Chuka again, smooth, already reaching for her bag, because Chuka had chosen his side long ago, and his side was whoever signed the invoice. Open it. Open the box. And here is where Amara made her own choice. And it is the choice that tells you everything about her. She could have clutched the box, refused, demanded a police officer, screamed about her rights, and she would have been within every right to do so. But she looked around at that ring of faces already convinced, and she understood that a poor woman who refuses to be searched has, in their eyes, already confessed. So she did the opposite of what fear would tell you to do. She held out the box herself. "Open it," she said quietly. "Open all of it. My bag, too. I have nothing to hide. And I would rather you see that than spend one more minute thinking I am a thief in a house where I only came to say, congratulations." Chuka took the newspaper package. He tore it open, rougher than he needed to, and the room leaned in to see the stolen diamond tumble out. No diamond tumbled out. Out came a small notebook, handwritten, and a strip of dried medicinal herbs. That was all. Chuka held them up, confused, almost disappointed, and someone in the crowd actually laughed, a mean little laugh. Because a poor woman's gift, being nothing but paper and herbs, was somehow funnier and sadder than if it had been a diamond. BC recovered fast. The bag, then. Check the... Enough. Grace's voice cut the room in half. Enough. She was looking not at Amara now, but at Chuka, at the way he was standing. At something the rest of them had missed, because they were all watching the poor woman. Grace had not spent 72 years reading rooms for nothing. Chuka, you searched her very eagerly. Turn out your own pockets. The room went silent in a completely new way. Ma? Chuka's smooth face was not smooth anymore. You heard me. You have been standing beside Mrs. Ivy for the last 20 minutes managing the toasts. You had your hands near everyone too. Grace's old eyes did not blink. Turn out your pockets, or I will call the police myself and let them do it. And then we will all find out together how a man's evening ends when a great house decides he has stolen from a guest. Chuka looked at BC. It was the smallest look. A flick of the eyes toward the woman who had told him, an hour ago, quietly, that there would be a bonus for him if the party went perfectly and any little problems disappeared. A man does not create a distraction for free. And that one look, that one desperate glance toward his paymaster was seen by everyone, because everyone was now watching Chuka the way they had been watching Amara a minute before. He did not turn out his pockets. He ran 3 steps into the crowd, and the crowd, which will always trip a running man, closed around him, and a security officer had him by the collar before he reached the door. And when they turned out his pockets for him, the diamond bracelet slid out onto the marble and spun there, catching the light, in front of 300 people, and the woman who had ordered a poor girl searched for it. The bracelet spun. It settled. Nobody spoke. Chuka, held by the collar, terrified now, did the thing that terrified men do. He talked. He talked to save himself, and in saving himself, he buried the woman he had been protecting. She told me to, Madam BC, she said. Make the girl look bad. Cause any distraction. She said there was money in it. I didn't take it to keep it. I took it to plant it. She wanted the cleaner searched. I swear it. I swear that is a lie. BC's voice had climbed high and thin. He is lying to save himself. Tunde. Tunde, darling. You cannot believe a thief over. But Tunde was not looking at her the way a man looks at the woman he is about to marry. He was looking at her the way you look at a stranger you have just realized you have been standing next to in the dark. He had heard the glance. He had seen the bracelet spin. He had watched, from the bottom of his own staircase, the entire architecture of the evening. His mother descending. The poor woman offering her own box to be searched. The smooth man running, and something in Tunde Adebayo, some warmth he had buried years ago after his father died, turned over in its grave and woke up. Bisi, he said. Just her name. Quiet. It was the quiet that frightened her, because Tunde was a serious man, and serious men are loudest when they go quiet. Darling, you cannot possibly. You told me she was staff. He was working it out as he spoke, slowly, out loud, and every word landed harder than the last, because he was not accusing her, he was discovering her. You told me it was a mix-up with the staff. But my mother invited her. You never looked at her card. She told you she had a card and you never looked, because you had already decided what she was. And when my mother came down to defend her, a bracelet went missing at exactly the right moment. And you were the first, the very first, to say, "Search the poor one." He stopped. How long, Bisi? How long have you been the kind of person who does this? Or is it that I never once looked, the way you never looked at her card? Bisi's face was doing something terrible now, the beautiful architecture of it collapsing in real time, because the vault behind the name was echoing, and now the name itself was cracking. And she could feel the whole plan, the whole survival, the whole marriage sliding out from under her, exactly the way her father's fortune had slid out from under him. And she reached for the only weapon a cornered person has left, which is the truth turned into a threat. You need me. Her voice dropped, low, ugly, honest at last. You think you're marrying for love? You're not. Nobody in our world marries for love. You're marrying a Coca, the oldest name in Lagos. And I'm marrying. And here she looked around at the tower's worth of wealth surrounding her, at the house, at the marquee, at the fortune. And she said the true thing, the thing she had never meant to say out loud. I'm marrying all of this, so don't stand there and be shocked. Everyone in this room understands the arrangement. Everyone except her. She jabbed a finger at Amara. The one person here stupid enough to think a party is about being a person. And there it was, out loud, in front of 300 guests. The frightened truth she had kept hidden for a year, that she did not love him, had never loved him, was marrying a fortune and a name, and would have stepped over a poor woman's dignity like a puddle to get there. The room which had wanted a scandal had gotten one it was not prepared for. Because a bracelet thief you can enjoy. A woman confessing she never loved the groom at the groom's engagement party. That is not entertainment anymore. That is a funeral with music. It was Grace who broke the silence, and she did not break it with anger. That is the part people remembered afterward, told and retold across 2 social circles for months. The old woman did not shout. She turned to Amara, standing there in her thin blue dress, holding her torn-open box of paper and herbs, and she asked her a question in a voice gentle enough for a hospital ward. Amara, may I tell them what you did? On the 9th of December? Amara nodded because she did not trust her voice, so Grace told them. She told them she had been in a private hospital, quietly, for a heart condition her family had kept out of the papers. Discretion required. She told them that on the night of the 9th of December, a cleaner had come into her room. A woman nobody had noticed, a woman being paid 9,000 naira to make the floor shine and leave. She told them that this cleaner had once studied nursing before life took the certificate away, and that her eyes had drifted, the way a trained eye drifts, to a drip bag whose label did not match its chart. A wrong bag, Grace said. The kind of small mistake that happens in tired hospitals in the middle of the night. The kind of small mistake that kills old women in their sleep and gets written up as heart failure. Because who ever checks, when an old woman dies quietly of her heart? She let that sit. This woman checked. This woman, who had every reason to mind her cart and go home. Who knew that when a rich person's care goes wrong, the first person blamed is the one holding the mop. This woman turned around at the door. She went to the nurse's station. She made them look. And they looked. And the bag came down. And I am standing here on my son's engagement night because a cleaner in a uniform 3 sizes too big decided that my life was worth the risk to hers. She looked around the silent room. I never learned her name that night. She never learned mine. She did it when she thought no one was watching, expecting nothing, wanting nothing. And then she went home on a bus at 4 in the morning and wrote it in a little notebook so she would remember to do better next time. Grace's voice did not break, but it came close, and coming close was more powerful than breaking. I found her. I sent her a card. And tonight, in my own house, on my son's own night, I watched her be called rubbish. I watched her be told to use the servant's door. I watched a diamond be planted on her, so that she could be walked out like a thief. And I watched her. Here Grace's old hand rose, and pointed, not at Bisi, but at the little torn box in Amara's hands. I watched her offer that box to be searched with her own hands, because she would rather be seen clearly than be thought a thief. Open it fully, my son. Read what a poor woman brought to strangers she thought were healthy and rich. Tunde crossed the marble. He took the notebook from the wreckage of the newspaper. He opened it, and he read. And the room watched his face while he read. Because it was not a poor woman's rubbish. It was pages, careful pages, of everything a person needs to know to keep an aging heart and aging kidneys alive. Warning signs never to ignore. Questions to ask a doctor that doctors hope you won't. Written out clean by hand. By a woman who had watched her own mother die for the want of exactly this, and had decided that the only gift worth bringing to a stranger's celebration was the gift of not losing someone you love the way she had lost someone she loved. Tunde looked up from the notebook. His serious face was not serious anymore. It was open, cracked open, the buried warmth right there on the surface, where his father would have recognized it. You brought us, he said slowly, how to save the person we love. To a house full of gold, wrapped in newspaper, because it was the only clean paper you had. I didn't know your mother was the woman from the hospital, Amara said. And now her voice did break, all the way, because being seen, after being invisible for so long, breaks something loose in a person. I didn't know any of you. You don't go to somebody's joy with empty hands. My mother taught me that. Even if you carry only water, you carry something. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, the gesture of a woman who has never owned a handkerchief. I brought what I had. I'm sorry it was newspaper. Nobody laughed at the newspaper now. The room had changed temperature. You could feel it, the way you feel a room turn. 10 minutes earlier, 300 people had watched a poor woman be humiliated, and most of them had done the easy thing, which is nothing, which is to let their eyes slide off, and their small laughs escape, and their comfort stay intact. Now, those same 300 people were doing the second easiest thing, which is to rearrange their memory of themselves so that they had been on the right side all along. You could see it happening on their faces. I was uncomfortable the whole time. Their faces were already rehearsing. I never laughed. I felt so sorry for her. Some of them even believed it. That is the thing about a crowd. It is cruel in the moment and innocent in the retelling, and it never notices the switch. But a few of them, a precious few, actually felt the thing land. The catering girl by the window, the one who had given Amara the small nod, was crying openly and not bothering to hide it. One uniform recognizing another across the length of a room that had tried to pretend neither of them existed. An old man near the back had taken off his glasses and was pressing his eyes. And Mrs. eBay, whose bracelet had started the whole avalanche, was looking at Amara with an expression that would take her weeks to understand. The expression of a woman realizing she had been one gasp away from helping to destroy an innocent person and would have gone home and slept fine. Grace let the silence do its work. She was old, and she was tired, and her heart was not strong, and she had come down those stairs faster than she should have. And now she reached out and steadied herself on her son's arm, and Tunde, without looking away from Amara, put his hand over his mother's hand to hold her up. The three of them stood like that for a moment in the center of the marble. The old woman, the serious son, the woman in the blue dress, and it was the first arrangement of the entire evening that looked like it belonged in that grand room. And it was made of the two richest people present and the poorest. And you could not have told, from the way they stood, which was which. BC tried one last time. Cornered animals always try one last time. This is theater, she said. But her voice had lost the room, and she knew it. One good deed does not make her one of us. Tomorrow she goes back to Ajagunle and mops floors, and you all go back to forgetting she exists. That is the world. That is how it actually works. I am the only honest one in this room, because I am the only one saying it out loud. And here is the part I want you to sit with, because it is the part that separates a cheap story from a true one. Grace did not destroy BC. She could have. She held all the power in that room. She could have had her thrown out, ruined, named across every drawing room in Lagos by morning. Instead, the old woman looked at the frightened, beautiful girl with something almost like sorrow. And she said the truest thing anyone said all night. You are right that is how the world works, Visi. And you have spent your whole life becoming very good at that world. But you have made one mistake, the same mistake your father made. God rest him. You confused the world's rules for the world's truth. The world's rule is that a cleaner is nobody. The world's truth is that a cleaner turned around at a door, and I am alive. You have all the rules and none of the truth. And that, my dear, is exactly why your family's vault is empty and your name is all you have left. You spent the truth long ago. You have been living on the name. Grace turned away from her, gently, finally, the way you turn away from something you have decided to stop feeding. There will be no wedding. Not because you are poor now. We are all poor, in the ways that matter. Some of us just hide it better. There will be no wedding because my son deserves a woman who would have looked at the card. Bissy left before the toasts. She did not run like Chuka. She walked, straight-backed in her beautiful dress. Out through the front door she had told Amara was not for people like her. And everyone watched her go. And no one stopped her, and that walk was the longest walk of her life. The Coca name would survive it, barely, the way names do. But the vault stayed empty, and the fortune she had come to marry walked her to the door and did not follow her out. The police took Chuka. The bracelet went back to Mrs. Eby, who was quiet for the rest of the evening, because she had been the loudest to gasp and was now doing the arithmetic of her own quick suspicion. Several people in that room were doing that arithmetic. That is the other thing a night like that does. It hands everyone a small mirror, and some of them looked, and some of them put it in their pocket to avoid looking. And that, too, is how the world works. Now here is where a lesser story would end. Rich man meets poor woman at party. Poor woman is vindicated. Rich man falls in love, wedding bells, the end. And I could tell it that way. And you would enjoy it, and it would be a lie. And I promised you I would not lie to you. Because that is not what happened. What happened is quieter and better. Tunde did not propose to Amara. He was a serious man who had just watched himself sleepwalk to the edge of marrying a woman he had never once truly looked at. And the last thing that man needed, the last thing that would have been fair to Amara, was to swing straight from one woman he did not know into another woman he did not know, dressed up this time as destiny. Amara was not a prize handed to him by the universe to replace the one that broke. She was a person, same as him. She had told the whole room so. So instead, when the guests had gone and the marquee lights were being taken down over the lawn, Grace Adebayo sat Amara down in the great quiet kitchen. The kitchen, notice, not the ballroom, and made her tea with her own 72-year-old hands and asked her about her life. All of it. The nursing she had to leave, the mother she had lost, the sister with the long-named heart condition and the longer bills. E's 19. Wants to be a lawyer. Argues like one already. Grace listened, the way rich people almost never listen to poor people, which is as if the answers mattered, as if the person across the table were a whole world and not a function. Tell me about the notebook, Grace said at one point. Not the one you gave me, the habit of it. Why do you write things down? Amara turned the warm cup in her hands. My mother died on a Tuesday, she said. A nurse was tired. It was nobody's fault. Everybody said, nobody's fault. The ward was full. She was overworked. These things happen. And they do happen. But my mother is still dead, and nobody's fault did not bring her back. So I decided. I was young. I decided it the way young people decide things. Too hard. I decided that I would be the person who wrote it down, who noticed, who checked, even if I was only ever the one holding the mop, especially then. Because the person holding the mop is in the room at 4 in the morning, when the important people have gone home, and 4 in the morning is when the tired mistakes happen. She looked up. I couldn't finish being a nurse, but I never stopped keeping a nurse's eyes. It was the only part of the dream that didn't cost money to hold on to. Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said, softly, my husband would have liked you. He built the whole company on a single idea, that the person nobody notices is usually the person who knows where the bodies are buried, and if you are wise, you listen to them first. Everyone thought it was cynical. It wasn't. It was the opposite. He meant, the invisible people see everything. Be kind to them, not because it is nice, but because they are the ones who will tell you the truth when the flatterers have all gone home. She set down her cup. You saw the truth on my chart when 3 trained nurses walked past it. You are exactly the person he meant. And then Grace made an offer. Not a fairy godmother's wand wave. A real offer, the kind a person can accept without losing themselves. Adebayo Pharmaceuticals ran a scholarship fund, a real one, dusty and underused, that Tunde's father had set up decades ago, and everyone had forgotten. Grace would see that Amara's nursing training was completed through it. Not as charity, but because a woman who caught a medication error in the dark while holding a mop had already proven she belonged in a hospital in scrubs and not in the hallway with a cart, full circle. The certificate that life had taken, given back, on the strength of the very thing the missing certificate could never have measured. And your sister? Grace said, stirring her tea. This heart condition with the long name. Bring me the file. My son runs a pharmaceutical company. The least we can do is make sure a clever girl who argues like a lawyer lives long enough to become one. She said it lightly, the way people say serious things when they don't want you to feel the weight of them and be unable to accept. Not charity, Amara. I don't do charity. It's lazy and it makes people small. Call it a debt. I owe you a life. Let me pay some of it back on a life you love. Amara cried then. not the pretty crying of films. The ugly, shaking, hands over the face, crying of a woman who has carried 2 other lives on a cleaner's wages for 4 years, and has just, for the first time, been allowed to put the weight down for 1 minute in a stranger's kitchen. She finished her nursing degree 18 months later. She was 28. She graduated near the top of her class, which surprised no one who had watched her read a drip chart in the dark. She took a job in a Lagos hospital, in a real one, and she was the kind of nurse who noticed things, who checked things, who turned around at doors, and more than one family went home whole because of it, and never knew her name, and she preferred it that way. Ease had her surgery. Ease lived. Ease is, at the time I am telling you this, in her 2nd year of law school, and she still argues about whose turn it is to do things, and she still mostly wins. And Tunde? Tunde and Amara did not marry that year, or the next. But a serious man and a woman who reads charts in the dark kept crossing paths. At the hospital his company supplied. At his mother's Sunday table, where Amara became a fixture, not as a guest of pity, but as a guest of Grace's genuine, fierce affection. They became friends first, the slow, unfashionable way. 2 people who had each nearly married the wrong future and were in no hurry to sprint into another. Whether it became more than that in the end, I will let you decide, because some things are not mine to hand you wrapped in a bow. I will only tell you that Grace lived to see her son laugh again, really laugh. The buried warmth all the way out in the open, and that on the day it happened, Amara was in the room. Chuka went to prison for the theft and the false accusation. A short sentence, long enough. BC did not go to prison. BC went where people like BC go, which is out of the story. The Coca name limped on. She married, eventually, a man with a smaller fortune and a matching coldness, and by every account they deserve each other. And I mean that as neither blessing nor curse, but simply as the way water finds its level. She never once, in all the years after, admitted she was wrong. That too is the truth. Not everyone learns. Some people would rather keep the name and spend the truth. The story does not owe you her redemption, because life does not always provide it. And I would rather tell you a true thing than a satisfying lie. But here is the small true thing I will give you instead, the thing that is better than her downfall. 2 years after that party, a young woman in a poor dress came into the Lagos hospital, where Amara worked, holding a sick child, terrified, being spoken to sharply by an admissions clerk who had already decided what she was worth by looking at her shoes. And Nurse Amara Nwosu, in her scrubs, with her certificate on the wall behind her, crossed the floor and stood beside the frightened woman and said, loud enough for the clerk to hear, "This is my patient. She and her son will be seen now, and you will speak to her the way you would speak to me." The clerk looked at the poor woman's shoes, and then at the nurse's certificate, and did the arithmetic, and got it right this time. That is the whole story. A woman was thrown out of a party for the crime of a cheap dress and an honest gift, and the wheel turned, the way it does, slower than we want, and faster than the cruel ever expect. And it turned all the way around until she was the one standing at the door deciding who gets let in and how they get spoken to. Not with a diamond, not with a fortune, with a certificate she earned twice, and a memory she never let make her hard. Now let me step out from behind the story for a moment, because I have been thinking about it for a long time, and I want to tell you what it left me with. I have been to parties like that one. Not on Banana Island, not with a string quartet, but the small version, the everyday version, the one that happens in offices and churches and family compounds, where a room quietly decides who is a person and who is furniture, and does it so smoothly that most people never notice it was decided at all. And I have been, at different times in my life, both people in this story. I have been the one in the thin dress, hoping to survive the evening by being invisible. And this is harder to admit. I have been the one whose eyes slid off someone and moved on. Because it was easier. Because noticing them fully would have cost me something. And I told myself I was busy. Most of us have been busy at least once, in the small way, on a small day. That is the uncomfortable thing this story keeps handing me. The villain is not exotic. The villain is the shortcut all of us take when we decide someone's worth by their shoes, because it is faster than finding out who they are. What I keep coming back to is the card. BC never looked at the card. Amara said, plainly, twice, I have a card, and BC had already finished thinking, because she had done all her thinking the moment she saw the dress. And I think that is the actual sin of the whole story, more than the cruelty, more than the planted diamond. The refusal to look. The cruelty came from somewhere understandable: fear, a collapsing life, a woman drowning. But the not looking is a choice we make cold. Every day, sober, and it is the cheapest and most expensive thing we do. Cheap because it saves us the effort of seeing a person. Expensive because, every so often, the person we refuse to look at was the one holding the notebook that could have saved our life. And we walked them out the servant's door. Here is what I believe, and you can disagree with me in the comments. I read everyone. I do not believe most poor people are secret heroes waiting to save a billionaire. And I do not believe kindness is always rewarded. Because it isn't, and any story that promises you it is selling you something. Amara did the right thing on the 9th of December, expecting nothing. And the truth is that 99 times out of 100, she would have gone home on that 4 a.m. bus and nothing would ever have come of it. And the rightness of what she did would not have been 1 inch smaller for going unrewarded. That is the real lesson, the one underneath the satisfying one. Do the decent thing because it is decent. Look at the card because there is a person behind it. Not because a billionaire's mother might be watching, because you might be the only one who ever sees them clearly. And that alone is worth doing, even if no one ever hands you a scholarship for it. The wheel does turn, but it does not turn for everyone. And it does not turn on schedule. And if you are only kind because you are waiting for it to turn, you have understood nothing. Amara did not turn around at that hospital door because she was owed anything. She turned around because an old woman she would never see again was worth a stranger's trouble. That is the whole thing. That is the entire secret. Everything else, the party, the diamond, the certificate, is just the world occasionally, imperfectly, catching up to something that was already true. So the next time someone walks into your bright room in the wrong dress, holding something wrapped in newspaper, look at the card. Just look at it. You will not always find a heroine behind it, but you will always find a person. And it turns out that is enough. It was always enough. We are the ones who made it complicated. Tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. Tell me if you've ever been the one in the blue dress, or if you've ever been the one who didn't look. I read them all. And if this story moved something in you, stay, subscribe, and I will keep telling you the true ones. The ones where kindness doesn't always win, but always, always counts.